Welcome to Jay Coletti's Racket Reviews. My name is Jay Coletti, and I will be your hostess. Here on Racket Reviews, we are dedicated to learning about all things organized crime, and I'm really looking forward to another individual study with you today, focused on Johnny Roselli. Following the Sam Giancana and JFK assassination coverage from last week, I left many of you with more questions than answers. So this week I'm following up with the story of the outfit's Hollywood extortionist turned CIA operative. We obviously have a lot to get to, so let's get right to it. Filippo Sacco was born in Asperia, Italy on July 4th, 1905. His father, Vincenzo Sacco, moved to the United States first, settling in Boston, Massachusetts. His wife, Maria Antonia Pasquale Sacco, and 6-year-old son Filippo, would join him in the United States, coming first into New York, then settling in Boston in 1911. Vincenzo Sacco never became a U.S. citizen, neither did Maria Antonia. Because of this, despite his patriotic birthday, Filippo Sacco, later Johnny Roselli, was technically an illegal alien. His father died when he was young, and his mother remarried a man who gave the budding mobster his first taste of crime when he burned the family's house down to collect insurance money. Filippo Sacco dropped out of school in 7th grade and drove a milk truck, which was a cover for the illegal delivery of morphine. He was arrested on September 14, 1922 at the age of 17 after a narcotic sting operation found him out. He would spend 6 months behind bars. After he was released, the informant who found him out was murdered, and Filippo Sacco was the primary suspect. To get away from the murder charges, he moved to New York under the alias John Morgan and began working with New York gangsters. He would catch the eye of Johnny Torrio and follow him into Chicago. Under Torrio's leadership, Sacco would become a member of the Chicago outfit, and by 1924 was heavily involved in the bootlegging business. Sacco also changed his alias to Johnny Roselli, an homage to Italian Renaissance sculptor Cosimo Roselli, saying, "He finished the Sistine Chapel after Michelangelo." I read the name in the encyclopedia. Roselli would prove himself a capable gangster to Capone and Torrio, and he earned their trust. During this time in his life, the 18-year-old Roselli would work as the driver for Torrio's 24-year-old underboss, Al Capone, a role later filled by Tony Accardo. Doctors recommended a warmer climate for the bright Roselli, as he was diagnosed with early stages of tuberculosis. He was moved out to California in the early 1920s, with the earliest report being that he was arrested in Burbank, California in January of 1924, under the name James Roselli, after purchasing 40 cases of beer. Roselli paid a $500 fine. He would be charged but not convicted in August of 1925 for operating a 1,000-gallon beer and liquor storage facility, this time under the name Sam Roselli. According to FBI files, Roselli was arrested by the LAPD in 1924 for carrying concealed weapons, but the charge was dropped. Then, from 1924 to 1932, multiple times for grand larceny, carrying a concealed weapon, and robbery. During this time, much of gambling was dependent on the wire services in order to get race or fight results across the country. Monopolization of the wire services was critical for organized crime. Mo Annenberg owned Hearst newspapers, and under this umbrella, the wire services. Annenberg was no stranger to organized crime or their methods, and allegedly hired gangs of sluggers and ex-boxers to defend the company from competing newspaper organizations. In 1929, Roselli was appointed to Annenberg's primary business representative in Los Angeles. Roselli would stay in this role for over a decade, moving into the movie business and flexing the mafia's muscle in entertainment. The records of the United States District Court of New York City indicate that on December 22, 1933, Roselli was found guilty for violation of Section 402A, Title 18 United States Code, and sentenced to 10 years in prison. He was released on parole after serving 1/3 of his sentence. The charge involved extorting money from motion picture producers to insure the studios against labor strikers. He would be arrested in 1943 for extorting money from movie studios and theater chains, and would be released in 1947. Roselli was very connected, and apparently, he was the person who introduced Frank Sinatra to Judy Campbell. He would later go on to revive Frank Sinatra's career by securing his role in the 1953 movie From Here to Eternity. According to Lee Serber, author of Handsome Johnny, The Life and Death of Johnny Roselli, gentleman gangster, Hollywood producer, CIA assassin, officially employed as an assistant purchasing agent at a salary of $65 a week. In reality, he became a kind of producer in training. As a fully functioning member of organized crime, Johnny Roselli's relationship to Hollywood was unique and extraordinary. Roselli, although not officially credited, was a producer in Cannon City and He Walked by Night, 2 noir films that are considered classics in the genre. One of Roselli's less successful Hollywood stories centers around one Roger Tuohy. Roger Tuohy, one of Al Capone's rivals during the beer wars specifically, was an Irish gangster and bootlegger who held back the Capone faction from taking over all of the labor rackets that had been held by the Irish mafia for many years. This rivalry between the men resulted in 100 casualties in less than 12 months, according to the Chicago Tribune. In 1933, Tuohy would be falsely accused of kidnapping John Factor, who was the brother of cosmetic mogul Max Factor, and he was also a wanted felon in England. Tuohy was found guilty and sentenced to 99 years in prison. He would spend 9 years behind bars and would be able to sufficiently prove his innocence with the help of a private investigator, but the courts wouldn't hear the case. Tuohy broke out of the Statesville prison in autumn of 1942 and would lead the FBI on a 3-month chase that ended in a bloody shootout that resulted in Tuohy back behind bars. 3 months after Tuohy was captured, Fox Studios had slated a docudrama, Roger Tuohy, The Last Gangster, with executive producer Johnny Roselli. Tuohy would sue Fox Studios and win, forcing the film to be withdrawn from circulation. And just because I know you want closure on this story as much as I did, John Factor, the alleged kidnapping victim, would go on to take control of Stardust Casino in 1955, a headship role used to cover the real owners of the casino, the Chicago outfit. The U.S. Department of Justice estimated that during Factor's alleged ownership, the outfit skimmed between 48 to 200 million from Stardust. Later, when Tuohy was finally able to prove his innocence, he was released in November of 1959. He would be murdered less than a month later by outfit gunmen on December 16, 1959. Okay, now let's get back to the Roselli story. While still in Los Angeles, Roselli would see the outfit through the 1946 wire service war that plagued organized crime all across the country. He who controlled the wire services controlled gambling. Roselli, under the monopoly created by Annenberg, was not going to let that slip through his fingers. And I have 2 very interesting facts for you about the wire service rackets. The first one has to do with a topic that everyone, at least on this channel, seems to enjoy, and that's the connection to the John F. Kennedy assassination. Following the 1946 wire service wars, Carlos Marcello, the outfit's man in New Orleans, and yes, I promise all of you that I will cover Carlos Marcello and the New Orleans Mafia soon, took over the New Orleans wire service where one of his clients was Lee Harvey Oswald's uncle, Dutz Moret. The second fun fact includes another conspiracy, and this is the murder of Bugsy Siegel. It has been alleged that Siegel's reluctance to abandon his dreams of owning the wire racket through Transamerican is the reason for his murder. Siegel had ordered the killing of Annenberg's lieutenant in 1946, and the topic of Siegel's unwillingness to give in was discussed at 2 1947 National Crime Syndicate meetings, one in Havana, Cuba, and one in New York. After Siegel's death, Roselli got into a brief gang war with Siegel's lieutenant Mickey Cohen in Los Angeles, but the LAPD, under Roselli's control, would quickly put an end to this mini-war after mobilizing the gangster squad that had been created specifically to target gangsters who were conveniently Roselli rivals, including Bugsy Siegel, Mickey Cohen, and others. Even into the early 1950s, Roselli was a political fixer in Los Angeles, but had begun working in Las Vegas in 1947. He would soon be known as the head fixer in gambling capital. He did well in Las Vegas under Sam Giancana. He was responsible for funding the construction of both the Tropicana and the Royal Nevada, which was later bought out by Stardust in 1958. Utilizing his entertainment industry connections, he built up his talent agency Monte Presser, and by 1959, nearly all of Las Vegas's talent was booked through that company. Really, without Roselli, we might not have the Rat Pack Las Vegas that has become so iconic in America's history. In both Las Vegas and Los Angeles, Roselli was not shy about spending money. He enjoyed fine restaurants, golf, lounging by the pool, and of course, women. He was married twice, but he was unfaithful. He was married once to an actress named June Lang, and then to a daughter of an Illinois newspaper owner, Marjan Stevick. The marriage was later annulled, and Stevick was committed to a psychiatric facility where she underwent electroshock therapy, according to Lee Server. The alleged sex-crazy mobster is also said to have been involved with one Judith Exner, lover of Frank Sinatra, Sam Giancana, and President John F. Kennedy. Roselli loved Hollywood and performed better in California, it would seem, than he did in Nevada, despite what I would certainly deem as success in Las Vegas. According to the New York Times, the outfit bosses became displeased with Roselli's Vegas performance and demoted him back to Los Angeles only. In spite of this, Roselli still had tremendous influence with the men who ran the Las Vegas casinos. He would play an important role in arranging the sale of the Sands Hotel and Desert Inn to Howard Hughes and would receive a $95,000 finder's fee for his trouble. In February of 1967, the FBI discovered that Roselli's real name was Filippo Sacco and tried to get him deported due to his status as an illegal alien. According to the FBI files, on October 20th, 1967, a federal grand jury in Los Angeles returned an indictment against target, Roselli, charging one count of willful failure to apply for registration as an alien and be fingerprinted under Title 8 U.S. Code Sections 1302 and 1306A, and 5 counts of willfully failing as an alien to give written notice to the Attorney General of his current address during January of the years 1963, 1964, 1965, 1966, and 1967 under Title 8 U.S. Code sections 1305 and 1306b. A bench warrant was issued on October 20th, 1967, and Target was apprehended at Los Angeles by Bureau agents on the same date and turned over to the U.S. Marshal. He was released on the same date under $5,000 bond. On December 18th, 1967, Target entered a plea of not guilty to the charges in the indictment. This never led to a conviction, and the case was dropped. The New York Times shared another story about Roselli that demonstrated his power and influence. In 1967, Roselli's friend Joe Breen, with whom he had worked in the movie business, wanted a gift shop concession at the Frontier Hotel but was denied. According to Breen, Johnny walked to the phone, made a call, then came back and told me the concession was mine. And all the time I knew him, Johnny never asked me to do anything illegal or even immoral. Despite his tremendous influence, Roselli's star had fallen. Frustrated by the loss of his outfit influence, Roselli was receptive when approached by the CIA about assassinating Fidel Castro. According to the Freelance Star, associates of Roselli said that he had persuaded Giancana to take part in this as it would be advantageous for them to get in on the CIA's good side. And honestly, given Robert Kennedy's passion as Attorney General for taking out organized crime, this wasn't a bad idea on Roselli's part. We discussed this failed assassination attempt on Castro in the Sam Giancana video, about how Roselli was the conduit between the CIA and the Cuban assassins. This attempt to kill Castro with poison pills being placed in his drinks and food was ultimately unsuccessful because of what Roselli described as cold feet on the part of the Cuban assassins. After being made a member in the Friars Club in Hollywood, apparently Sinatra got him in, he would be charged with participating in a card-cheating operation. This wound up costing $50,000 in legal fees, but when Roselli went to Howard Hughes for a loan to cover those fees, even after having assisted him in the purchase of the Sands and Desert hotels, Hughes refused. Roselli was convicted and sent to federal prison in McNeil Island, Washington, and according to his friends, he did not hold up well against prison life. In 1971, Roselli was called to give Senate testimony, and got to leave prison, regarding the ownership of the Frontier Hotel. At first, Roselli refused to answer, but he was given immunity, and his testimony was promised to be kept secret. Roselli testified without outfit permission. It has been contended that this was to avoid further jail time, as he feared the outfit bosses would direct him to say nothing or refuse to appear. Roselli's secret testimony led to the arrest and imprisonment of the boss of St. Louis and 2 Detroit captains, Anthony Giordano, Anthony Zerilli, and Michael Polizzi. Despite the heavy mafia suspicion that Roselli had talked, they couldn't prove it for sure. When Roselli was called to testify for the Church Committee on June 24, 1975, he gave details about his role in the assassination attempts of Castro, both before and after the Bay of Pigs operation. Before his testimony, according to the New York Times, one of Roselli's friends had asked him if he was afraid for his life. Roselli, who was over 70 at this point, replied, "Who'd want to kill an old man like me?" Very cryptic and cinematic of him to say. Roselli was asked during the testimony, "When you were asked to help arrange for the assassination of Mr. Castro, what was your understanding of who in the United States government wanted you to do this?" He answered, "Well, anybody in the United States government. My point was, if I am recruited in the army, and I was in the Second World War, it is like being recruited in the army, and if it comes through from higher authority, I don't ask any questions how high it was, as long as there were government people. I was satisfied that I was doing a duty for my country." Also, on a bit of an odd note, the Church Committee noted in their report that during Roselli's time with the CIA, he actually covered almost all of his own expenses. Roselli's testimony and others led to the Senate Committee's conclusion that whatever the totality of the motivation of all those involved in the operational end of the plots, the uncontroverted evidence is that they all truly believed the U.S. government was behind the project. Days before Roselli's testimony, Salvatore Giancana had been killed in his home by an unknown gunman. The murder remains unsolved. This allegedly frightened Roselli and prompted him to move to Miami Beach, Florida, and away from Los Angeles and Las Vegas. When the committee wished to recall Roselli to the stand, he had gone missing, and he had been missing since July 28th of 1976. On August 9th, 1976, his body was found by 3 fishermen in Dumbfounding Bay near Miami Beach in a 55-gallon oil drum. According to Time magazine, heavy chains were coiled around the container and holes were punched in the sides. Then the drum was dumped in the waters of Florida. It might have stayed at the bottom indefinitely, except that the gases caused by the decomposing body gave the drum buoyancy and floated it to the surface. The New York Times gives further detail as to the gruesomeness of Roselli's body upon discovery. A cannon washcloth was taped tightly over Mr. Roselli's mouth to make sure he was dead. Then his legs were sawed off so that the body could be stuffed into the drum. To lift the body into the oil drum, the men tied a rope around the neck and stuck a tow hook into each side of the abdomen, just under the ribs. While one man hoisted the body with the rope, the other lifted with the 2 hooks. When the torso was finally lowered into the drum, the legs were stuffed in with it, and heavy iron chains were laced through the holes in the drum, around the body and over the lid of the drum. Law enforcement was able to identify Roselli with his fingerprints fingerprints. Roselli, who had suffered lung problems all of his life, with tuberculosis as a young man and at the time of his death emphysema, died of asphyxiation. His murder remains unsolved. Filippo Sacco's body was cremated, and the location of his ashes are unknown. Naturally, much speculation surrounds the reasoning behind the gruesome murder. Many rule out the belief that this was a government killing, due to the violence and gruesomeness of the murder and the state of the body. However, according to the claims of Joe Bonanno's son Bill Bonanno, he spoke with Roselli about the Kennedy assassination and indicated that Roselli was behind the president's death in his 1999 book, Bound by Honor, A Mafioso's Story. Those Bonannos sure do like publishing controversial books, that is for sure. Most theories maintain that Roselli was murdered by his fellow mafiosi as he couldn't keep his mouth shut, giving a poetic end to Roselli's life, with the limelight being the death of the outfit's former Hollywood liaison. I hope you've enjoyed this episode of Racket Reviews talking about the glamorous life and gruesome death of Johnny Roselli. This Hollywood liaison certainly had a cinematic lifestyle that ended with tragedy. Make sure to let me know in the comments below or on Facebook or Twitter who you think is responsible for Roselli's murder. And also don't forget to utilize the comments section and social media to let me know who you would like to see covered next. I love hearing from you, and I'm always happy to investigate. Make sure to like, subscribe, and click notifications to get more Mafia content sent directly to your sub box. Ciao!